Secondly, the automatic submission feature should be kept enabled to simplify your work. Discussing what enabled and disabled mean, both relate to automatic submission. Automatic submission means the student sends their attempt. If enabled and the student submits on time, their name appears as the submitter. But if they exit without submitting, for instance, leaving in the last 2 minutes, if enabled, the system submits after 50 minutes. The system records the grade. Automatic submission sends the student's attempt. The student submits. If enabled and the student submits on time, their name appears as the submitter. What if the student exits without submitting? If they leave in the last 2 minutes and can't submit? If enabled, the system submits after 50 minutes. The system records the grade. If you turn off automatic submission, what happens? It means you don't want automatic submission. The system won't submit. If the student has an issue or exceeds 50 minutes, the system won't submit. Who submits? The student must. What if the student delays submitting? Okay, if the student has an issue and exits without submitting, if enabled, it auto-submits after 50 minutes. The grade is recorded and shown. If you disable auto-submit, what happens? You don't want auto-submit. If issues arise or time exceeds, it won't submit. The student must submit. What if they delay? You must find and submit their attempt. You click and submit. If auto-submit is off, manually check and submit late attempts. Consider the effort required. If you turn off the automatic submission, what does that mean? You don't want the automatic submission to work. If a student has an issue or exceeds 50 minutes, the system won't send, so the student must send it. But if the student delays submitting, then you must go into the student's attempt to submit it. You must click and submit it yourself. If you turned off automatic submission, you must manually check and submit each late attempt. Think about the effort to check each attempt for students exceeding 50 minutes. Let's avoid hassle and enable automatic submission. If not submitted after 50 minutes, the system saves and submits answers automatically. In this case, access the student's attempt. You will find the option to submit the attempt and click to submit the student's attempt. If you turned off automatic submission, you'll have to go in and submit the attempts for every student who exceeded 50 minutes. Consider the effort required. Enable automatic submission to avoid hassle. If not submitted, after 50 minutes, the system saves and submits answers automatically. Please pay attention to this important point. The due date in tests is unnecessary and problematic. Due date settings often cause confusion. For example, here the test is set for the 8th at 4:30 p.m. until 5:30 p.m. What you'll find tiring is having to go into each student's attempt who exceeded the 50 minutes just to submit it yourself. So let's avoid that hassle and choose to enable the option, allowing the student to submit their own attempts. If the student doesn't submit, once the 50 minutes are up, the system will automatically save their answers and submit them as if I took the paper from the student right after the 50 minutes. So this is an important point that I hope you all pay attention to. Also, regarding the due date in tests is not necessary and can actually cause problems. I always notice in some tests that the due date settings can create confusion. For example, here, the test is set for the 8th at 4:30 p.m. until 5:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. till 5:30 p.m. For example, sometimes I find him here on the 8th and here on the 4th. What does this mean? What does this mean? Due date means that any student who misses this date will be marked as late. The test starts at 4:30. Students can access it from 4:30 to 5:30, so entering during this time isn't late. How can I set a due date saying after 4:30 is late? They can access the test from 4:30 to 5:30, which means that any student who enters between 4:30 and 5:30 is not late because I allowed that. So how can I allow this access and then set a due date here saying that any student who enters after 4:30 will be marked late? There's a contradiction here. It doesn't make sense. Okay, let's set the due date for 5:30 instead, meaning the due date will be at 5:30 instead of 4:30. But that doesn't make sense either because 5:30 is when the test ends. If a student tries to enter after that, they won't be able to access the test at all. They won't find the link to enter. Therefore, the due date below has no value for me. It won't help at all. In fact, if I keep it at 4:30 like I had it before, it would make more sense. Okay, let's set the due date for 5:30 instead of 4:30. So the due date will be at 5:30. This is important because if a student tries to enter the test after that time, they won't find the link to access it at all. They simply won't be able to enter. Therefore, the due date below has no value for me. It won't help at all. In fact, if I keep it at 4:30 like I had it before, then all the students who enter after 4:30 will be marked as late based on the due date. If they are marked as late, there will be an issue because the orange circle indicating they need grading will appear for every student who entered after 4:30. So you will have to go back into each student's attempt. So the due date is useless. If I keep it at 4:30 as before, then all the students who enter after 4:30 are late. This causes an issue because the orange circle for grading will appear for every student who entered after 4:30. You must then go back into each student's attempt and save and exit for each one. So all students who enter exactly after 4:30 based on the due date will indeed be considered late. And as long as the word late is put here, there will be a problem, as the orange circle will also appear, which will specifically require a grade for every student who entered after 4:30. So you will enter again for every student's attempt. And you do something called what? Save, exit. So why? You're just making things harder for yourself. A lot of effort. So just remove the health check completely. We don't need it at all. So what are the important things for us in the tests? The important things are the availability of the test. Yes. Add an announcement. Yes. Setting a timer. Yes. This temporary appointment is important to us. Setting the timer. Specify the number of minutes for the timer. Enable automatic submission. Display options after or until are important. Sometimes people delete this option. Deleting it can cause losing grades. This option should remain to include grades and calculations. We need this test and grades in the grading center. Also, submitting the test. Submit the test at the same time. All questions should appear on one screen. Random arrangement is fine. Random arrangement can confuse students and reduce cheating. The students' grades in the test. We need the grades included in grading calculations. Also, we have the part about submitting the test. Everyone should submit the test simultaneously. Questions should appear on one screen. Random question order may confuse students but helps reduce cheating. If each question is on its own screen, I don't recommend a back button as students move from one question to the next. All questions should appear on one screen for the student. The test questions should be displayed on one screen, and the arrangement can be random. That's not a problem. Random arrangement can confuse students and help reduce cheating. If we choose to have everything at once, each question will be on its own screen. There will be previous and next buttons. I do not recommend a back button because the student will solve questions sequentially. Enabling the back button means they can't go back. They must proceed from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 until the last question. This is important to consider. If we choose to have everything at once, so each question will be on its own screen. Since each question will be on its own screen, there will be a button for previous and next. I suggest not having a back button as the student will solve the first question and then move on to the second question. They will answer it, then proceed to the third. Afterward, if they wish to return to the first, it's problematic. Enabling the back button implies no return. They have to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 until the last question, but they can't go back. This is crucial. I advise against it. Students should access all questions, answer them, reach question 20, then return to question 1. I prefer this. Is this option available? Yes, you can use it. However, having each question on its screen prevents confusion. When the student moves to question 2, they answer it and proceed to question 3. If they recall an issue with question 1 and want to return, enabling the back button restricts them from going back. They must progress sequentially from 1 to 4. I advise against it. Students should access all questions freely. Navigating from question 20 back to question 1. Is this option available? Yes, it is, and you can use it. It's better to display each question on its own screen to avoid confusion. I suggest separate screens for each question, allowing navigation between questions and revisiting any question for verification. Avoid restricting their ability to review questions. I don't recommend it. The student should navigate all questions freely. Is this option available? This option is available. Each question should be on its own screen to avoid confusion. Seeing all questions at once is not preferred. Each should be separate, but navigation should be allowed. Avoid restricting review of previous questions. This is important for test settings. If all the questions are on one screen, then I can see all the questions at once. No, I prefer to have each question on its own screen. Each question should be on its own screen. But at the same time, the student should be able to navigate between this question and that question and go back to any question they want to check. So let's avoid restricting them from going back to another question to verify or review it, for example. This is important regarding the settings. I sincerely hope the test settings and configurations are absolutely clear to each and every one of you and the entire community.